Receiving an allowance without having to do household chores might sound ideal at first, but living with my mother-in-law, Doris, adds complexities to what could be an easy arrangement. As a 34-year-old web designer, I've adjusted to the ups and downs of freelancing, but Doris's constant sarcasm often dims the perks of this lifestyle. My husband, Bobby, and I face various challenges living with her, mostly because of our differing views on work and home responsibilities. After getting married, I transitioned from a corporate job to freelancing, a change that was well received by my former employer and myself. It's allowed me to maintain a steady stream of projects with familiar clients, freed me from daily commutes, and given me more time to focus on our home. Despite the benefits and Bobby's supportive attitude, Doris clings to her traditional beliefs about marriage and the role of a wife. In her mind, a wife should primarily be a homemaker, and she regularly makes her views known, dismissing the idea of modern shared responsibilities between spouses. To Doris, my freelance work seems insignificant, and she believes it doesn't contribute meaningfully to the household finances. I try my best to balance my web design projects with household chores when I have free time. But no matter what I do, Doris's opinions remain unchanged. Her dissatisfaction seems to stem from the contrast between my contemporary approach to work-life balance and her more traditional expectations. She likely views me as an outsider disrupting her family dynamic, especially since she's grown more reliant on Bobby since his father passed away 4 years ago. We live in the home Bobby's father purchased, which Doris now owns outright, thanks to life insurance settling the mortgage. This house serves as the backdrop for our intergenerational tensions, and navigating daily life here means managing conflicting perspectives while trying to respect both the old and new ways of family life. Despite the occasional tensions, the house, with its thoughtful design, comfortably accommodates our small family and provides me with the perfect workspace. It also doubles as a popular gathering spot for Doris's friends, many of whom have lived in the neighborhood for over 25 years. When they visit, the atmosphere shifts, and I often find myself playing the role of a gracious hostess, serving coffee and sweets as the group chats. Inevitably, their conversations drift toward sharing grievances about their daughters-in-law, a recurring topic of discussion. I sometimes find myself chuckling as Doris and her friends swap stories about their daughters-in-law. One tale that always gets a reaction is about a daughter-in-law who frequently flees to her parents' home after minor disagreements, sometimes staying away for nearly half the year. They label her as financially reckless, shaking their heads as they recount how her behavior has left their sons bewildered and even brought debt collectors to their doors. These discussions, which often take place near my workspace, sometimes turn into a sort of informal competition, each woman trying to outdo the others with stories of their troublesome daughters-in-law. Praises for daughters-in-law are rare in these sessions. However, on the rare occasion that one is commended for efficiently managing the household while holding down a job, Doris's reaction is always the same: sour. She dismisses such efforts with a casual wave of her hand, reducing my own freelance work to nothing more than a side gig. Even as the room fills with laughter, the blend of humor and critique reveals a lot about the generational divide in values and expectations surrounding family roles. These moments make it clear just how challenging it can be to reconcile traditional views with modern family dynamics. Amid the lively discussions and laughter that echo through our living room when Doris hosts her friends, my job often becomes the subject of scrutiny. Doris loudly questions the value of my work, openly wondering how much I actually make. This shift in the conversation inevitably leads to a discussion of the spending habits of daughters-in-law, with sharp contrasts drawn between their spending and the old-fashioned belief that the husband's income should be the family's primary support. The room always bursts into laughter, finding humor in the seemingly outdated nature of such expectations, even as these beliefs still linger in the background. I often feel overwhelmed by the repetitive stories and outdated views expressed during Doris's gatherings. To cope, I slip on my headphones and try to drown out the constant undercurrent of belittlement aimed at modern daughters-in-law, myself included. One evening at a family dinner, when Bobby suggested buying a new car, Doris immediately questioned why he needed my approval for such a decision. Despite Bobby's efforts to explain that we make major decisions together as a family, Doris insisted that since he had the driver's license, he should choose whatever car he wanted without my input. Caught in this tug-of-war, I tactfully deferred the decision back to him, a moment that perfectly encapsulated the complex dynamics at play in our household. Bobby, raised to value mutual decision-making, consistently seeks both my and his mother's input on major choices. Meanwhile, Doris, shaped by her late husband's more patriarchal approach, clings to the belief that such independence is normal. Every time Bobby asks for my opinion, it irritates her, leading to accusations that I'm too controlling. This recurring theme in our interactions reveals the tension between traditional and contemporary values in our family life, highlighting the difficulty of balancing respect for the past with the realities of a modern partnership. Struggling to respond to Doris's criticisms, I've come to recognize that I do tend to express my concerns rather than make decisions unilaterally. But my dismay grew when, during a recent argument, Bobby sided with his mother, blaming my vocal nature for his habit of consulting me before making any decisions. Several months into our marriage, it became clear that he rarely defended me in front of his mother. Even in private, his apologies and assurances that he prioritized our relationship started to feel hollow. This realization deepened with the car buying incident, which casts a long shadow over our relationship. Bobby, who had initially seemed considerate, ultimately failed to support me in front of his mother, raising serious doubts about our future together. I began wishing he wouldn't mistake his indecisiveness for kindness and hoped Doris would be more direct in her communication. A month later, Bobby's new car finally arrived. He and Doris were thrilled, inviting me for a celebratory drive. But the mood quickly shifted when the cost of the car was revealed, a staggering $300,000. This impulsive purchase, made without any real discussion, felt like the final straw in an already strained dynamic. I confronted my husband about the financial implications of such an extravagant purchase, but he brushed me off with dismissive responses, casually suggesting that we could just take out a loan. Doris immediately jumped to his defense, scolding me for questioning the expense. According to her, I had given Bobby the freedom to make his own choice, so why was I complaining now? Frustrated, I asked how we could possibly afford such a luxury, but Doris cut me off sharply. It's not like you pay for anything, so you have no right to complain. Feeling utterly unheard and marginalized in decisions that directly affected our shared life, I was left grappling with a sense of isolation in my own home. It became clear that my input was undervalued and that financial decisions were being made with little regard for joint consultation or responsibility. As I tried to assert my contributions to the household through my freelance work, Doris's reaction was unusually harsh. She scoffed at my efforts, dismissing my income as a little side job that couldn't compare to Bobby's substantial salary of over $130,000 a year. Her disdain was palpable, and just as I was about to defend myself, I noticed my husband had silently withdrawn from the confrontation, leaving me alone to face his mother's harsh words. After enduring this kind of treatment for too long, I finally reached my breaking point when Doris snapped, "A daughter-in-law, like you should just get out." Her words hit me like a slap in the face, not just an insult but a total dismissal of everything I had tolerated. Angered and deeply disappointed by Bobby's indifference, I turned to him and blamed him for the escalating conflict, knowing it stemmed from his chronic inability to stand up for me. Fed up, I said firmly, "Understood. Then I will leave." I walked to my workspace, gathered my computer and essentials, and prepared to leave. As I crossed the threshold, I informed Doris that I would return later to collect the rest of my belongings. Her angry gaze followed me, and just as I stepped out the door, she shouted after me, "When you step into this house again, it will be to sign the divorce papers." Her abrasive words echoed behind me, something I had never expected to hear, and they stunned me into silence. I sought refuge at my parents' house, shaken and unsure of what to do next. The moment my mother saw me, she knew something was wrong. She asked gently, "What happened?" Struggling to articulate the full weight of the events, I stood there, lost for words, feeling the heaviness of everything I had just walked away from. I shared my regrets with my parents, expressing how much my husband had changed from the man who once cherished me deeply. Talking through the situation brought some relief, and with no children complicating matters, my mother gently suggested I consider divorce sooner rather than later, especially since I was financially independent. Over the weekend, with my father's support, I began taking the necessary steps toward a new beginning, contemplating a future that, though uncertain, promised peace and self-respect. I returned to collect my belongings from the house I had shared with my husband and his mother. Both of them seemed to avoid any final confrontation. Standing outside my husband's room, I spoke softly, "You took care of me for a long time. Can you sign the divorce papers? I slipped the documents under the door, and soon after, I heard his indifferent reply, I've signed them. We're done here. Retrieving the signed papers felt like a hollow victory, marking the end of our marriage. I left without a word to my mother-in-law, carrying the deep sadness after 3 years in that house, a place with only a handful of happy memories. I went straight to the city office to submit the divorce papers, hoping the formal separation would help bring closure to this chapter of my life. My plan was to temporarily move back to my parents' home and continue working remotely as I started to rebuild my life independently. My mother suggested I stay with them for a while, reassuring me that it would be less worrying than living alone. My father shared similar concerns, cautioning that Bobby and his mother might unpredictably show up at my door. Although I initially thought that scenario was unlikely, living at my parents' home brought unexpected comfort. Thankfully, my job's flexibility allowed me to work remotely, and I extended my stay with ease. 3 months passed, and as Bobby and his mother slowly faded into distant memories, an unknown number suddenly appeared on my phone. Initially hesitant, I considered it might be a mistake or an unwelcome reminder of my past. After several persistent calls, I finally answered, only to hear my ex-husband's frantic voice on the other end. "Why didn't you answer the phone earlier?" he asked, sounding confused and somewhat panicked. Prepared to end the conversation quickly, I calmly replied, "There's no reason for us to communicate anymore," making it clear that I had moved on and had no interest in reopening old wounds. I was about to hang up, but his next question caught me off guard. "Wait a minute, why isn't my smartphone working?" he inquired. With little interest, I suggested he contact the phone company, but then a thought struck me. I asked if he had been making regular deposits into the joint bank account we used to share. Previously, we both contributed to this account, my steady salary along with his more variable income from selling health products, which was often insufficient due to its performance-based nature. Normally, I topped up the account at the end of each month, but for the last 4 months, only his contributions had been made. It dawned on me that I had left in the middle of the month, and the payments for the new car loan might have already begun. My ex-husband fell silent as the realization hit him. Calmly, I stated, "I've been managing our household expenses with my income until now. From this point forward, you'll need to take care of your own living expenses." Internally, I wanted to tell him, "You reap what you sow," but I held back and quietly ended the call. Reflecting on the situation, I realized that my ex-husband had never fully disclosed his actual earnings to his mother. She seemed unaware that our household had been primarily supported by my salary after we got married. Perhaps he was too embarrassed to admit that his wife was the main earner. It was clear that basic utilities like electricity and water shouldn't be disrupted so easily, which pointed to a deeper issue of financial mismanagement and lack of transparency. One of the many problems that had plagued our relationship. The fact that his mobile service was the first luxury to go was telling. One holiday morning, the house intercom buzzed insistently, signaling an issue at the door. My father responded sternly to the visitor, "We don't want to be involved with you anymore. Please leave." Sensing the gravity of the situation, I hurried to the entrance alongside my mother. Through the intercom, we heard the familiar voice of my former mother-in-law, pleading for a moment to talk. As I faced her just as my father had predicted, anger was evident on her face. She immediately launched into accusations, blaming me for not making the usual monthly deposits, which she claimed had led to their utilities being cut off. We were all taken aback, unsure of what she meant. My ex-husband attempted to step in, saying, "Mom, stop it. Doris is no longer involved with us." But his mother brushed him aside, continuing her tirade. "Bobby earns $7,500 a month. How could this happen?" she exclaimed. Her fury revealed the depth of their financial disarray, and in that moment, it became clear just how much they had relied on me, both emotionally and financially. I responded quietly, correcting her. The $7,500 was my income, not Bobby's. Shocked by this revelation, she turned to my ex-husband, who reluctantly admitted that his actual take-home pay was far less. My former mother-in-law looked at me in astonishment, unable to comprehend the truth. I explained that my income came from a steady job, not just an allowance. She then turned to Bobby and asked again about his earnings. He sheepishly confirmed what I had said, his own contributions amounting to about $1,500 monthly. After a moment of stunned silence, she made an astonishing proposal. "Doris, how about coming back? It seemed ludicrous that she would ask me to return after insisting I leave in the first place. I refused firmly, making it clear there was no going back to the way things were. We're already divorced, I stated bluntly, and this is no longer my concern. Despite my clear refusal, she persisted, insisting that everything could be resolved if I'd just reconciled with Bobby. My father, growing increasingly impatient, spoke in a forceful tone. "Leave now," he demanded, "or I'll call the police." They left in a hurry, almost stumbling as they exited, my father sternly warning them never to set foot in our home again. Reflecting on the encounter, my mother was visibly furious, but my father's indignation was even more pronounced. I felt a deep sense of relief that we had finally severed ties with such unreasonable people. As time went on, I learned through a mutual acquaintance of Bobby's that his hardships had only deepened. He was forced to give up his parents' house and the land, moving into a modest apartment with his mother. The new car, which was rarely used, had been sold off to settle the remaining loan. Even after clearing his debts, Bobby continued down a path of financial irresponsibility, squandering what little he had left on gambling. Eventually, his whereabouts became unknown. Meanwhile, my former mother-in-law was diagnosed with dementia and now resides in a nursing home. On a brighter note, my career is thriving, and I am living independently. Recently, I started dating a colleague who is well aware of my past marriage. Unlike Bobby, he is dedicated to his job, financially responsible, and doesn't depend on his spouse for income or engage in reckless spending. While we haven't explicitly discussed marriage, I feel confident about our future together, sensing a genuine potential in our relationship that I never experienced before.